To OTR FM, part of the ION Radio Network.
IPMNation.com.
It's a historic show tonight. For probably the first time ever, I'm going to say something very complimentary about Paul Ryan. Also, some black Trump supporters have been cozying up to a white nationalist. They have something in common. No, that's not from The Onion. That's a real story. We'll get to that, too. And in a current case being heard by the Supreme Court, some pro-lifers helpfully remind us all of the importance of completely ignoring science. So business as usual for them. It's Thursday, March 24th, 2016, 11 p.m. in the Eastern Time Zone. From the Uptown Auto Repair Studio, Matt Connarton Unleashed starts right now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Matt Connarton Unleashed. We're live on this Thursday evening. Coming to you, as always, from the Uptown Auto Repair Studio in Manchester, New Hampshire. And tonight, because it's Thursday, we're on OTR FM, the premium channel on the OMTimes radio network, as we are every Tuesday and Thursday. And, of course, we're 5 nights a week on the IPM Nation live station, IPM Nation 2. The live station, of course, is powered by Ambit Energy. If you'd like to learn how to save on your energy bills, go to ipmnation.ambitrabbit.com. You can check that out. You'll be very glad that you did. And let's see. Programming notes quickly. This week, the television edition for Unleashed is up on our the IPM Nation YouTube and Vimeo channels. If you go to if you're on ipmnation.com, you can click the YouTube link in the upper right, and that will take you directly to the IPM Nation YouTube channel, and you can watch. John Hopwood and I sat down with Jim Rubens. Jim is running again for the U.S. Senate. This time he's challenging for the Republican nomination for the Senate, so he's challenging current New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte. So we'll see how he does. I mean, I did support him last time, and I'm supporting him this time. Although we disagree on some things, you'll have to watch the interview. But John Hopwood and I both vehemently. One thing we disagreed with him on is immigration, which we kind of cover at the end. I think Mr. Rubens was getting a little frustrated with us, but I do like him overall. There's a lot that we agree on. He talks a lot about crony capitalism and how to deal with the issue of money in politics and all that. And it definitely takes some principled stands and says some things that, some of his fellow Republicans, label him as a too moderate or even a liberal or whatnot, because that's kind of the climate with both parties, really. If you're not, on the Republican side, it's like if you don't take the extreme far-right position on absolutely everything all the time, then you'll inevitably have somebody calling you a liberal or a rhino. That certainly happened to Jeb Bush when he was running, when he was in the presidential race. He was Jeb's pretty conservative overall, but because he supports immigration reform, he's a liberal, he's a rhino. And, and you see the same thing on the left, too. The polarization goes in both directions. It's remarkable watching Hillary desperately try to figure out how to get to the left of Bernie Sanders, because that's what you have to do to win the Democratic nomination. You have to fall in line there too. So it's pretty difficult. That's why there's no moderates anymore. There's either extreme hard left liberal Democrats and extreme hard right conservative Republicans generally. There is no big tent anymore on either side of the aisle. And speaking of which, by the way, before we get any further, too, if you'd like to enter the conversation tonight, of course, we have the chat room open at ipmnation.com/live2. So you can always use that. You can tweet me at Matt Connarton. There's a Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. And we do have the phone line open, 617-917-4IPM. That's IPM as an IPM Nation, 617-917-4476. You can call us or text at that number. And, by the way, so Tuesday night, Dave Ridley, who we hadn't heard from in a while, Dave Ridley of the Ridley Report, he called in. And we had an issue. I tried to answer the phone, and we ended up calling him back because, we had an issue with our phone line as far as taking calls live on the show. It only seems to happen when Dave calls. But here's some good news. Finally figured out the problem, what the real problem was with that line. So now that we know what the issue was, that is resolved. So Dave Ridley, if you're listening, if you call tonight, I promise you, when you call, I will answer and we'll get you right on. Because that's only... It's funny. Out of all the times Dave has called the show, I think that's there's only been one instance where Dave Ridley has called and we've actually been able to simply answer the phone and bring him onto the show. Every other time there's been some sort of technical kerfuffle that we've had to deal with, but it's been figured out. So Dave Ridley, if you're out there, feel free to call us. The thing that I mentioned Paul Ryan in the intro, and Paul Ryan is in an interesting position where he's sort of, well, for one thing, he's being talked about as possibly, as strange as it sounds, possibly being the Republican nominee in 2016. And if you haven't been following this, you might wonder, well, how is that even possible? He's not running. He was Romney's VP pick in 2012 and whatnot. But in terms of it very possibly being a contested convention, because Trump very well may not get to 1237 in terms of delegates, that opens it up. And, there's talk about Kasich, which would be amazing. I've been saying all this time, I mean, if you're a regular listener of the show, I always say John Kasich, by far the best candidate of the Republican field, and it was from the beginning. So of course, they don't want to nominate him. He definitely would be the best. And by the way, polling data shows, even though, he can't get out of the single digits in terms of enthusiasm among Republican voters in the primaries, he crushes Hillary in a general election contest more so than any other prospective Republican candidate. But, he'd be a phenomenal general election candidate. So, of course, he can't possibly be the nominee. And again, it's that thing like I talked about. I mean, John Kasich, my perception of John Kasich used to be that he was a pretty conservative Republican. But the party has shifted so far rightward that, again, Kasich is one of those guys, he doesn't demonize immigrants, and, he speaks in a manner that isn't overly aggressive, and he's not attacking other Republicans during the debates. And so, he's a moderate. He's too much of a moderate. He's a liberal. He's a rhino. I hear it on conservative talk radio all the time. Oh, that John Kasich, he's a rhino. But and now, of course, some people on the right are saying that about Paul Ryan. Now, Paul Ryan, part of why he's in such an interesting position is, because of his current position as House Speaker, he is, I guess, technically he'd be considered the top guy in terms of elected office in the Republican Party. So there's talk about if they have a contested convention and it's not John Kasich and it's not Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz will absolutely lose to Hillary, as I believe Trump will. they're talking about possibly Paul Ryan, who has publicly said he's not interested. But everyone always says they're not interested. You know, and Mitt Romney said he's not interested, absolutely not interested. But I'm sure if it came to a contested convention and the RNC went to Mitt Romney and said, well, what do you say? You know, I think he'd be all in. Everyone always says they're not interested. It's basic politics. If they feel it's going to make them look bad to say that they are interested, then they will deny that they're interested right up to the moment that they are presented with the opportunity. You see this every 4 years with the VP choices. Every prospective vice presidential candidate will say, no, I'm not interested in being vice president, right up until they're asked. That's not unusual at all. Typically, if it's someone who is already in the running for president and they had to drop out, and they act like, you know, the vice presidency is somehow beneath them until they're asked, and then they do it. But Paul Ryan has kind of taken a position against Trump and some of Trump's overly aggressive tone, and he said something. Well, he said a lot of things in a pretty good speech the other day. But he said something in particular that I really have to compliment him on, because I think it took some courage on his part to take this position. And I'm actually really impressed with him. So we'll talk about that when we come back. More Unleashed coming up. Don't go away. We're live.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
Hi everyone, this is Shay Parker, the host of Best of the Best, which airs live right here on IOM Radio every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm super excited to bring you expert guest hosts, spiritual discussions, free psychic readings, and so much more. I can promise that you will not want to miss this one-of-a-kind, fun, yet touching, down-to-earth show. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on OTR-FM. This is Shay Parker, and I can't wait to see you there.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed. We're live on IPM Nation 2 and OTR FM. It's a Thursday night. And talking a little bit about Paul Ryan, House Speaker. And here's what's going on. So, and this is from Politico. Paul Ryan lays it on the line. The new speaker makes clear in a speech he's disturbed by the state of the GOP in American politics. Now, this is clearly, and I'll read some of this article in a moment, and then I have some audio that I want to play for you. But this is clearly a reaction to Trump, because Trump is going to have a very difficult time if he's the nominee winning the general election, because with all the inflammatory language the sort of the subtle encouragement of violence. You know, he says things at his rallies like, don't get me wrong, I think blaming him, I don't think it's fair to blame him for violence breaking out, for example, like what happened in Chicago. But he never, of course, denounces the violence at all, and even sort of subtly encourages it, like saying things like, hey, if you want to punch that troublemaker, I'll pay for your legal fees and whatnot. So he seems to get off on it. Incredibly irresponsible. That's putting it mildly. You know, so there's a lot wrong with Trump, in my view. And his general election pivot doesn't seem to have begun yet, probably because it's now becoming apparent that he may not be the nominee after all. But you would think, though, he'd want to settle down so that if it is a contested convention, he can calm the fears of the establishment, and they'll go ahead and say, okay, well, now that he's calmed down and he's ready for the general election, maybe we can support him after all and let him be the nominee. But he doesn't seem interested in that. So he's more interested in just being Trump and continuing to be this character. And I guess maybe out of arrogance, he figures he'll be the nominee anyway. Or maybe he doesn't care if he's the nominee or not. Maybe he's just enjoying the ride. I don't know. I mean, he does look like he's having fun. Got to give him that. He looks like he's having a great time. But so here's anyway, let me read some of this from Politico. It's now clear what Paul Ryan thinks about 2016. The political system is completely broken, possibly beyond immediate repair, and it's his task to at least try to inject some sanity and civility back into the process. Is he running for president? The answer is exactly the same as it was in 2014 when he tiptoed into Iowa for his first speech in the state since running on a national ticket. No, he isn't. But he's been inexorably drawn into the election, and he sees himself as responsible for the future of the party. And the GOP, for the time being, is being led by someone who Ryan believes is frequently is at odds with conservative and American principles. During a 30-minute speech billed as the state of American politics, given in a flag-draped Ways and Means Committee room in the Longworth House office building, Ryan didn't mention Donald Trump by name, but he didn't need to. Standing in the same room he assumed the speakership 5 months ago, Ryan took aim at the core of Trump's message. He decried identity politics, criticizing those who pit groups of Americans against each other. He said the nation's political system doesn't need to be this bad. He accused both parties of staying comfortably in their corners, only talking to those who agree with them. Well, that's absolutely very, very true. I talk about that all the time. Everyone likes to be in their bubble. Ryan also looked beyond 2016, saying he didn't want to, quote, talk about politics as it is today. I want to talk about what politics can be. He also said in a room full of mostly congressional interns, he said, quote, this is not just a lesson for young minds, but a message for all Americans. Our political discourse, both the kind that we see on TV and the kind that we are experiencing among each other, it did not used to be this bad, and it does not have to be this way. Now, a little skepticism, that's really helpful. But when people distrust politics, they come to distrust institutions. They come to lose faith in government. They lose faith in our future. We are slipping into being a divisive country. We are speaking to each other in echo chambers where we only talk to those who agree with us, and we think that there is something wrong with people who don't agree with us. We question and impugn motives instead of test the original thesis. This is where it doesn't need to be, where it wasn't and where it shouldn't be. So the whole point I would make is if we are going to keep this beautiful American experience going, we're going to have to stay unified as a country, unquote. This sunny message from Ryan is hardly new. He's been delivering shiny city on a hill speeches and accompanying policy papers for some time. It started out with a budget a half a dozen years ago. Now it's his Confident America push, a policy program aimed at giving the House of Representatives a new identity. In the spring, Ryan hopes to release a detailed agenda so the voters can compare and contrast the Republican and Democratic parties. To be fair, Ryan admits he's fallen short in much of what he's preaching. He took responsibility for previously describing the nation as makers and takers, something he called an oversimplification of the nation's social fabric. And this is the part that impresses me. This really impresses me. Ryan said, quote, "I realized I was wrong. Takers wasn't how to refer to a single mom stuck in a poverty trap just trying to take care of her family. Most people don't want to be dependent, and to label a whole group of Americans that way was wrong. I shouldn't castigate a large group of Americans to make a point," unquote. Now, let me stop there. So that impresses me on a couple of levels. Number one, how often, when do you ever hear a politician say, "Remember what I said a few years ago? I was wrong"? I mean, you might hear a politician say, "I misspoke," but even that, you got to pull teeth to get anyone to ever say. They might try to rephrase or reframe what they said before if they get caught up in a situation where they're being confronted by a journalist. Well, this is what you said. Did you mean this? And, well, no, I meant this. And, there's all kinds of slippery, slimy, slick things that politicians do. If they've said something in the past that they now realize is unhelpful to their own political future. So they got to figure out a way to spin it or pretend that they just never said it or whatever. Paul Ryan said something that I personally, and this gets to the other reason why I'm impressed with what he said. He addressed something that he said that I personally find mortifying, because one of the things that, not only does he own up to it and flatly say, "I was wrong," which politicians never, ever do, so good for him, but he acknowledges he was wrong about something that personally has always driven me nuts. I've always hated the way so many Republicans demonize and degrade poor people. I grew up in a pretty liberal Democrat household. My father now is he calls himself sort of a liberal to moderate Republican. But when I was a kid, he was a Democrat. My mother, still very liberal herself. But I was sort of raised with this idea that I think a lot of people who are raised in Democratic households are, that Republicans really just kind of hate poor people. And of course, if you say that to a Republican, they'll be very offended. "I don't hate poor people. I love all Americans," and this and that. But Republican politicians do very often talk about anyone who's on any kind of government assistance, anyone who's on welfare, anyone who collects unemployment, anyone who gets any kind of help from the government at all. There is a narrative among Republicans that those people are losers and leeches and a drag on society, and they just suck as Americans and as human beings in general. I mean, that was highlighted by, remember Romney's 47% comments? Oh, these Democrats, 47% of them, they won't even take responsibility for themselves or their lives. Pretty offensive stuff, right? But this is how Republicans typically do talk about poor people. And they do it because it plays well with Republican voters. So, obviously not all Republicans hate poor people, but a lot of Republican politicians find a lot of success demonizing poor people. When Paul Ryan originally gave that speech where he talked about takers and makers and lumped all the takers in as basically being leeches and losers and bad Americans and bad people, Republicans generally responded very favorably to that. So for him to really say, "I was wrong," that the single mom trying to take care of her kid on her own is not a bad person. She's doing the best she can and needs some help and whatnot. Or to suggest that, because one of the things that people who demonize anyone on any kind of government assistance, they like to, they basically operate under the assumption, this is part of where this comes from, they operate under the assumption that they're all committing some sort of fraud, right? They're all stealing from the rest of us. Because everyone has a "I know a guy" story. Like if you're talking to someone who thinks that way, and you try to explain to them that, well, clearly some people need help, some people genuinely need help, what will someone who thinks that way usually respond with? It happens all the time. "Well, I know a guy who blah, 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 and he didn't really need that welfare check and nah, right? Everyone has an "I know a guy" story. And of course, because this is just how people are, and this is just how people's minds work, if someone wants to believe something, they really want to believe something, they don't need overwhelming empirical data or evidence to believe whatever it is they want to believe. All they need is one example. Well, I know a guy who is bilking the system. So then in their minds, that means absolutely everybody is bilking the system. You know, that's where a lot of racism comes from. You know, I used to know somebody who actually was an IPM Nation personality. I won't say who it was, but she had had a working situation where one of her coworkers was black, and apparently her black coworker was rude to her on the job, or at least she perceived her as being rude. So now, of course, she, or at least I haven't talked to her in a long time, I assume she still walks around just believing that all black people are rude and evil, you know, because that's what happens. Somebody has one bad experience and then they just assume, oh, it's always like this. And you see that with a lot of the right-wing hatred of poor people. You know, everybody's got a story. I read this, I heard this, so that means they're all, it's the same thing with immigrants. You know, an immigrant gets in trouble, an undocumented immigrant in particular gets in trouble, so that means they're all rapists, right, Mr. Trump? You know, that's these generalizations. They're very effective because people believe them, because a lot of people are just kind of dumb and just believe whatever generalization you'll hand them. And that is very often the case with poor people. And now here's Paul Ryan saying, I was wrong. So you never hear a politician say I was wrong. And to hear a Republican politician say he was wrong to demonize the poor, that's amazing. So I'm very impressed with Paul Ryan. And we got to take a break. We'll be right back.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Matt Connarton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connarton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connarton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed. We are live tonight on IPM Nation 2, and it's Thursday, so we're also on OTR FM, the premium channel on the OMTimes Radio Network. And joining us right now via the telephone is Dave Ridley of the Ridley Report. Dave, how are you tonight?
Hey, good, Matt. How are you?
Very good. And I'm glad we were able to get you on without any technical issues. So what's going on in your world this evening?
Oh, well, I just had more thoughts about the FBI raid in Keene.
Oh.
And I guess really that's actually related to your show in the sense that I didn't really think about this last time I called about this, but I'm kind of a dispersalist, right? I like the idea of dispersing power and assets so that no one can raid one spot and get a windfall from that particular spot. So like there's this Swiss concept, that you don't group up your weapons into depots. You keep them in people's closets, right?
Yeah.
And in the sense of the CAC, of course, it's not a weapons place really, but it was an electronics center. It was the Keen Activity Center is what I'm referring to. It was a concentrated area of activism and activist electronics, and so that was part of why it ended up being targeted. And so it should be better if we had, like dispersed radio shows, as opposed to so many eggs in the Free Talk Live basket. And so that's why I'm kind of glad that you're out there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we should clarify for listeners too. You're of course referring to the raid. The FBI went into the Free Talk Live / LRN.FM studios on early Sunday morning, and basically took all the electronics, or at least all the computers and SD cards and all of that. And do you have any? Is there any more information on that, Dave? I haven't paid any attention. I've been so busy, at least for the last 24 hours. I haven't really looked at anything regarding this. Is there anything new on that situation? Do you know?
I haven't seen much new over the last 24 hours. I did have a bunch of questions that I posted on Facebook that did get they were answered.
Yeah.
And basically it's one of those things where I thought, if you're going to have a center, then the only justification for that would be if the center is well defended in some form or fashion. In this case, it would be defended by PR, or it would be defended electronically by having video of everything that goes on in there.
Mm-hmm.
But that just really didn't work out. It all fell apart, fell through, and I don't even know why exactly. There was only one video shot from the scene by an independent videographer, and that was someone who showed up 3 hours after the raid started, was called, and drove there and filmed from the outside. None of the interior video, if any, was shot. I don't think any of that survived, or at least failed to be confiscated. There was a surveillance camera that got some video, but no one's bothered to upload it. So it was not very impressive electronically, the way that this played out. On the other hand, Free Talk Live did not get knocked off the air. They managed to make it on the air that night, and I thought that was kind of impressive.
Yeah, I remember we were skeptical that they were going to be on, and then I saw the Facebook message from Mark Edge, and even the Facebook message wasn't definitive, or posting, I should say, when he said Free Talk Live should be on tonight. He didn't even say will be, he said should be. But yeah, sure enough, they were on. Aside from not being able to take Skype calls, they were, they were in pretty good condition. I didn't listen tonight. Is Ian still not on? I know that Mark was saying the other night he had temporarily banished Ian from being on the program, obviously for PR reasons, I suppose.
I don't know. I listen to the show kind of in sequence, and my rule is that if they're not talking about New Hampshire, I just skip the show altogether. So
sure.
I have skipped a bunch of shows, but I think it's like the show after next that's in line for me to listen to, which was the one that was that night. I just, maybe I'm not a pure newsman and operating this way, but I just kind of have a regimen and a sequence of things that I follow, and I don't really jump things out of line just because something big happened. I don't change my programming just because something big happened. I'm just not reactive that way. It's not pure news, maybe, the way I operate. But so there will be a day or two before I see this, or before I listen to this show that aired that night, and I start finding out a little bit more about how they handled their first night. And they're also, then something else they're doing that's positive is that I guess Mark is trying to create his own show, which will create an additional layer of dispersal But I don't know what the situation is with Ian being banished. I'd need to know more before I cast judgment. But at first glance, it doesn't seem like a very good idea because you're kind of doing the FBI's work for them.
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, so I don't know why he was banished, but I would assume that it must have something to do with the fact that he's accused of having these, out there views about the age of consent. There's accusations he had an underage girlfriend, and so these kinds of things make him a little bit radioactive.
Right.
And the Free State Project, Ian Freeman, the host of Free Talk Live, the Free State Project limited him from Porkfest in some form or fashion. I'm not sure he's banned from entering the grounds, but it's sort of uninvited Free Talk Live to some extent.
Yeah.
And so that's all questionable. It's eyebrow raising, if some of these accusations against him. But on the other hand, you don't want to play the enemy's game too much.
Yeah, I wonder if I can't speak for Mark, and I don't know if it's fair to speculate or not, but I just kind of, I'm guessing, because Mark didn't explain it. I mean, they were kind of making a joke about it, like he was saying, like I'm King Mark the Third or something, and I've banished Ian from the kingdom or something. And obviously it's just temporary. But I assume maybe it's to appease affiliates who have a concern, or I don't know, but because there has been a lot of bad PR, and I mean they're a business. They're on. I think they're on 170 stations now, and they've got that to consider, and advertisers, and I don't know what the internal dialogue is there. I can only speculate, and maybe I shouldn't, but I do anyway because it's interesting too. But you know what too? It might have been voluntary on Ian's part. He might need a break. Couldn't blame him.
Well, Ian has indicated that I don't think he's angry with the Free State Project for what they did.
Yeah.
And I think he did sort of banish himself from the Free State Project relationship that Free Talk Live had with him. I think he pulled the plug on that to kind of help the Free State Project. So I don't think there's too much ill will on his part. There are a lot of Free Staters that are pretty freaked out about him. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like anything else. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Mark is, the Free State Project is, Ian is, other than some kind of questionable admissions of his on the air, there's not much to make him seem very guilty yet. So.
Yeah, and it's not as though he's been charged with anything. And that was one of the surprising things to me about the raid, is that the FBI goes in, takes all this stuff, but nobody's charged.
No, that's normal. I think they do. That's what they did in the previous raid in Keene, which was on just a business. It was not Free Stater related.
Okay.
Supposedly this is like a worldwide thing that the FBI has done, where they commandeered some kind of child porn website, ran it for 2 weeks, and found out who was visiting it. Right.
Right.
And then supposedly 1% of the visitors to the site were arrested or charged or found or something like that. But that would mean that the other 99% were provided child porn by the FBI. So that's raised a lot of eyebrows about the FBI, right?
Right. Yeah. Well,
those are Mark Edge's numbers, and those may change. The FBI may hit its stride later on and start making a larger number of arrests of these thousands of people that it provided child porn to. I guess if it arrests them all, then that would be an indicator that no one got away with being helped by the FBI to child porn.
Yeah, it's always interesting the way government tries to. Or at least tries to look like they're dealing with the problem, whether it's child porn or whether it's whether it's drugs, the drug war and how just super helpful that is. in combating the drug problem in this country. And of course I say that sarcastically. It's yeah, they're a real helpful bunch, federal law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, another concept, I guess, in dealing with this kind of crisis is that. I should back up and say that for the uninitiated, that Free Talk Live apparently got caught up in that because the allegation was that someone at the Free Talk Live, the building that houses Free Talk Live, one of the many dozens of people that come and go from there, accessed to this FBI site that the FBI child porn site. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah. On their
that's
server.
What the warrant alleges. So and this access supposedly would have been about a year ago, from what I understand. And so that's the official, at least according to some of the Free Staters, that's the official FBI purpose for the raid. They took about 80 pieces of electronics, which, again, there shouldn't be 80 pieces of Free Stater electronics in one location, right? And that's been one of my beefs with the Keene Activity Center for so long. It's got the word center in it.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you raise. I never thought of that. And, well, apparently neither did anyone else. Dave, we're
Well, the word.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's bad enough to have the word center, but to actually be a center is just as bad. And you shouldn't. Yeah, that's the basic Free Stater concept, supposedly. And Bill Walker was the person who introduced me to that idea when he was writing one of his articles about Switzerland. You don't want to be attacked. Have no center.
That's right. Dave, we're up against a break, so we'll let you go. But thank you so much for calling in tonight.
Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. Take care. All right, that was Dave Ridley from the Ridley Report, and we're up against a break, so we'll come back in 2 minutes. Don't go away.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Join Elliot Jollish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jollish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jollish Hour. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed as we cruise into our final segment tonight. Don't forget a couple things. Monday of next week, my guest will be Brian Brody of The Brian Brody Show, which will be debuting on IPM Nation 1 on April 1st. And no, it's not an April Fool's prank. He really will be debuting April 1st at 7 a.m. Eastern on IPM Nation 1, and then we'll be on, of course, every weekday at 7 a.m. Eastern going from there. If you want to learn more about the show, go to ipmnation.com/Brian Brody. I should spell Brian is Brian and Brody is Brawdy. And you can learn more about the show. There's a link. You can learn more about Brian, and really, really excited about that. Also, too, this week's television edition, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is up. John Hopwood and I interviewed Jim Rubens, who is a candidate for Senate, Republican, challenging Kelly Ayotte for the nomination for for the Senate seat from New Hampshire, one of the Senate seats, one of the two. He did run a couple of years ago. He wanted to win the nomination and try to take down Jeanne Shaheen. So this time he's going after Kelly. So we'll see. It was a very interesting hour that we spent with Jim. So you can check that out. Also, too, this week's Ward 13 is also up on the IPM Nation YouTube page. Ward 13 with John Hopwood, which was, of course, live immediately preceding Unleashed. And that was no guest. It was just Mr. Hopwood and myself, or I guess I was the guest. I'm sort of his unofficial co-host. And we discussed, well, you know what? I'm not even going to talk about it. I will just encourage everyone to go check it out because it was a very, I think it was the most fun I've had thus far on John's show. And I always enjoy being on Ward 13, but this was particularly fun. And if you're at all interested, you owe it to yourself to check it out. Before we wrap up, so I'm going to try to cram as much as I can into this last segment. And thank you again, by the way, to Dave Ridley of the Ridley Report for calling it tonight. You can check out the Ridley Report on YouTube and the journalism that Dave does. Actually, he was officially a guest. This was a few months ago, but we did a long-form conversation with Dave on the show. If you want to check that out, we do archive the shows at ipmnation.com/MCU live. And also all the shows that we do on OTR FM, OMTimes does a great job of archiving those at with their radio on demand feature at OMTimes.com, and they're also putting them up on iTunes for us, which is great. Let's see. So I want to play because I didn't quite get to it when I was discussing it before. There's audio of Paul Ryan. Getting back to Paul Ryan for just another minute. Prior to him ever making this speech that I was so impressed with, where he talked about the makers and takers and how he was wrong. Apparently, that's not a new tact for him. Back in January, he was on Face the Nation on CBS with Bob Schieffer discussing this very thing. And it's a very short clip. It's only about a minute. Let me just play this quickly.
Let me ask you about the phrase takers. You once referred to those who receive benefits as takers, and you later apologized.
Yeah, I was wrong.
And it's interesting you say, because in that case you seem to be saying, be careful about the words you use. In the presidential campaign right now, that would be called political correctness.
Well, look, I think I was wrong. I mean, when you do something that is wrong, you should call it to it. People who go on government assistance, people who are on government benefits, sure, some people are going to exploit the system. Some people are choosing to just live on the dole and not work because they prefer that. That's a small percentage of it. Most people don't want to be poor. Most people don't want to be dependent. And if we speak as if everybody is in this category, that's wrong. And so that's what I did, and I was wrong to do that. And so that's why I think we need to respect people for the ambitions and the goals and the dreams that they actually have, and then help facilitate their access to it. So, yeah, I think political correctness has gone way overboard, and that's the new thing in the campaign, which I think is great. But let's just be accurate. Let's be right, and let's not have populism that's unattached from our principles.
Yeah, just very impressed with that, and I also agree with this comment too about political correctness having gone way overboard. Okay, quickly. So on HuffPost, and I did share this out to the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page, and I said, no, this is from HuffPost. This is not The Onion. Black Donald Trump supporters get cozy with white nationalist. Sisters Diamond and Silk appeared on a radio show with a man who openly speaks about his fears of white genocide. This is real. Well, I mean, anything with Trump is believable. You couldn't write this. It says here, they've become two of the most beloved Donald Trump supporters on the campaign trail, Diamond and Silk, or Lynette Diamond Hardaway and Rochelle Silk Richardson. The sisters, who now act as Trump surrogates, have appeared on his behalf at numerous rallies, touted Trump on TV news shows, and won lavish praise from the candidate himself. In their YouTube videos and media appearances, Diamond and Silk rail about the perils of immigration. They support the border wall and the mass deportations and the ban on Muslims that Trump has proposed, despite criticism that Trump's platform is racist and unconstitutional. This week, Diamond and Silk took their iconoclastic shtick a step further when they sat down for an interview with white nationalist, Holocaust denier, and fellow Trump supporter John Friend. The show was broadcast. This is incredible stuff. The show was broadcast on American Free Press, a website that calls itself independent, populist, and pro-white, and promotes racist and anti-Semitic views and conspiracy theories. The two sisters, prompted by Friend, accused immigrants of demanding services and civil rights and somehow depriving Americans of those things. Quote, "It's time for the American people to be taken care of," unquote, said Silk in the interview, first reported by Media Matters. Quote, "It's time for somebody to look out for the American people, and that's what we love about Donald Trump. Everybody wants to be mad at Donald Trump, but at least he listens to the American people," unquote. Okay. When he's not interviewing other Trump supporters, Friend writes a blog, The Realist Report, where he spouts racist and anti-Semitic views. He also cites Hitler and Goebbels as his inspirations. Oh, he sounds like a charming fellow. He wrote recently, quote, "The only real, authentic kind of Americans there are, considering the racial group that settled, built, founded, and developed this once great nation, are those of white European descent," unquote. Friend has also said that intermarriage between races will result in white genocide. Oh, my goodness. But he kept his views on race under wraps during an interview with the Diamond and Silk and agreed with most of what they said. Said Silk, quote, "People are tired of being under or unemployed. We need to bring back good jobs, opportunities for people to be gainfully employed. People are tired of his divide in our country. It's time to bring back spirit. It's time to unite. Remember, this is the United States, not the divided states, so it's time for us to come together," unquote. HuffPost has reached out to the sisters to ask how they feel about speaking with a man who openly calls white people the only real Americans. This is not the first time that a prominent white nationalist and anti-Semite has engaged one of Trump's surrogates for an interview. Earlier this month, Trump's and son Donald Trump Jr. Spoke to the white nationalist James Edwards about his father's immigration platform. Edwards was able to interview Trump Jr. because he was broadcasting his radio show from inside a Trump rally. And by the way, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with this, but Huffington Post for a while now, at the end of every story that involves Donald Trump, they put this. And this, I'm not making this up. This is not a joke. They actually put this. HuffPost does at the end of every Trump story. Editor's note: Donald Trump regularly incites political violence and is a serial liar, rampant xenophobe, racist, misogynist, and birther who has repeatedly pledged to ban all Muslims, 1.6 billion members of an entire religion, from entering the U.S. So, well, I mean, I guess that's basically true. Everything they say about him there. Okay, one other quick thing before we wrap up, and we're not going to have time to get into this in depth, but there is a story. This is also on HuffPost. The Supreme Court birth control case is an insult to science. The plaintiffs in Zubik versus Burwell argue preventing pregnancy is the same as abortion, which is not the case. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to read the story to you. You can check it out on HuffPost, but something that drives me crazy about the pro-life movement is that pro-lifers and their argument that life begins at conception, which, by the way, I've noticed a new tact in the last couple of years. A lot of pro-lifers now claim that science has proven this. I don't know what science they're referring to that they think has proven this, but they argue that birth control is the same as an abortion. Because, for example, they argue that the morning after pill is the same as an abortion. And the morning after pill, all it is an extremely high dose of birth control. You know, the pill, the most popular and relied upon method of birth control for decades in the United States. Now, there is a separate pill, RU486, the abortion pill, which it's called the abortion pill because that causes an abortion. RU486, the abortion pill, and the morning after pill are not the same thing. But one of the tricks that pro-lifers use is they try to pretend that they are the same thing, and some of them very cleverly, and I see this happen all the time, and I've had conversations on the air with people, particularly on Gary's show, Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, because he brings on a lot of pro-lifers. I've called people out on it and said, wait a minute, you're talking about these two different things like they're the same, and they're not. But by their logic, because the morning after pill is just a very high dose of birth control, by their logic, the pill itself causes an abortion. So all of you, just so you know, this is how they think. All of you women out there who take the pill every morning, you're all baby murderers, according to the logic of these people, just so you know, because they think that the pill causes an abortion. Anything that interferes, biologically with a pregnancy is an abortion in their eyes. And then they can't figure out why those of us who are pro-choice think that they're all crazy. And they're not literally all crazy. I understand that there are some pro-lifers, I assume there must be, who do not believe that using birth control makes you a baby murderer. And yet, they try to pass these constitutional personhood amendments that would define life as beginning at conception, claiming that science has proven this when it actually absolutely has not. And therefore, if life does in fact begin at conception, then the pill, because the pill interrupts between conception and implantation, which even Newt Gingrich says is when life really begins, implantation, and he's a pretty conservative guy. But according to their argument, all you